So tonight we are joined by Meg Hunter Kilmer. I'm really excited that she's here. And I'm gonna stop sharing this big screen so that you guys can actually see Meg and not look at a big slide of Meg. So let me stop that for a moment there. All right, and I'm gonna close this PowerPoint up and.
I think you still need to mute everybody, Rob. Some people are still.
Do I?
Yeah, you didn't mute us.
I didn't mute you guys? All right.
But we listen.
Now you're muted. Okay. All right. So I'm excited about Meg being here. Not only is Meg awesome, she's is described in her descriptions and all that, all the things that she does. I'll just tell you a little bit about that and then tell you some interesting other cool things. She's a hobo for Christ, right? Literally packed up her things and has been traveling around the country for, I guess, like 7 or 8 years now, and speaking at different groups and being a missionary, being an evangelist, blogging, putting out a lot of videos, basically just serving Christ in whatever way she's able to do. But the cool backstory with Meg is that Meg was in middle school when I started the junior high work camp middle school mission way back in '95 at St. Mark's in Vienna. And Meg is from St. Mark's in Vienna. And she was a really awesome member of our youth program. She was like one of you guys back in the day in the 90s, was part of our theater ministry, was part of our youth group. And anyway, an awesome person. So I'm really proud of what Meg has done with her life so far. And I'm super stoked that she can join us because she's not in Virginia right now. So us being virtual actually made this possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Meg to speak to us about the joy in quarantine. I'm going to actually try to I'm going to find Meg's picture. Hey, Meg, oh, there you are. I'm going to try to spotlight Meg so you guys can make sure you put her on your screen now. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. Hi, Meg.
Hi, friends. Ooh, now I can only see myself. Okay, that's exciting. I am super excited to be here. Rob and I were trying to make something work out before quarantine started, and God just gave us a different opportunity to encounter each other. So as Rob said, I'm from the DC area, went to Notre Dame, taught for middle school and high school religion for 5 years, but I have been living out of my car for 8 years. So I don't have a house, I don't have an apartment, I don't have a storage shed. I literally go all around the country, all around the world. I've been to 50 states and 25 countries, driven, I've lost track, maybe 250,000 miles in the last 8 years. And right now I am squatting in an abandoned rectory in Oklahoma because being a hobo when you aren't allowed to leave a house is a complicated thing. But I'm psyched to be here with you guys and to talk just about my experience of coming to know Jesus. You know, Rob said I was involved in everything at St. Mark's, and it's interesting because I was involved in middle school really before I knew Jesus. I grew up in a Catholic family, was baptized as a baby, made my first went to my first confession, lied in my first confession to the priest, which I do not recommend. I went in and I was like, this is dumb. Like, you don't have to tell me how to live my life. No, like 7 years old, all kinds of sassy. And I went in, I lied to the priest, and I walked out and was like, oh, good thing you only have to do that once in a lifetime. Am I right? Which I was not. I was not right. That is not a thing. But I walked out having really turned my back on God, having committed a mortal sin at the age of 7, and I never turned back. You know, my family went to church on Sundays, but I wasn't interested in knowing the Lord. I wasn't interested in prayer. And so I just kind of got involved in all of like the stupid, worthless sins that you can do when you're, 10, going to private school in Vienna. And by the time I was 11, I was an atheist because sin just builds. And I told people there is no God. Anyone who believes in God is an idiot. And I was still like the good kid. I wanted everybody to like me. So I didn't like hang out with Rob at junior high work camp and tell him I thought he was an idiot for believing in God. I pretended, right? But the thing about being an atheist is the world will tell you that is a sweet deal. Because if there is no God, there is no sin, right? There's no guilt. There's no shame, only there's still guilt. And there's still shame, there's just no mercy. There's no forgiveness, there's no healing. Whatever you've done, you're going to carry that until the day you die, at which point you will cease to exist and your body will dissolve into its component parts. I mean, not to be like a total buzzkill, but like that's kind of where I was, right? Like 11, 12 years old, I was just like, there's no point. I remember waking up in the morning thinking, why bother getting out of bed in the morning? It's not like today is going to be any different from yesterday. It's not like today I'm not going to screw up. I'm not going to hurt people. I'm never going to be enough. I'm never going to be smart enough. I'm never going to be popular enough. I'm never going to be successful enough. I'm never going to be happy. And I imagine that a lot of us who are listening right now have had that experience, right? That moment where you realize that this world is not enough. And I kind of weighed my options, and I thought, well, you know, I guess what? You just keep going, like you just reconcile yourself to the fact that you're never going to be happy. And I was miserable, like just violently miserable. And I'm a good faker, so I don't think people really knew. And I got confirmed because that's what you do, right? Like I'm sure y'all got confirmed because you want to be saints, but I got confirmed because my parents dropped me off at confirmation class and said either go inside or wait in the rain. And then I got dragged on this confirmation retreat. And I did not want to go on this confirmation retreat. And I thought everything about this retreat was going to be stupid. And like, to be fair, it was the 90s. So like, just a lot of the 90s was stupid, right? But people were trying so hard. And I was just like, nope, not interested. I am too cool for this, right? In my extra large X-Files t-shirt and Umbra shorts, whatever. And I remember they were going through this examination of conscience, right? Asking these questions about our sin. And I was like, who do you think you are? You can't tell me how to live, right? It's my life, it's my body, it's my choice. I'm gonna do what I want when I want. You don't own me. And then one by one, every girl in my small group started going to confession. And I looked around and I was like, if I don't go to confession, no one will be my friend. Which is not a thing, right? Nobody's like, I'm sorry, we're only friends with people who avail themselves of sacramental absolution. So if you don't want to go to confession, you can sit over there. Because on Wednesdays, we go to confession. Like it's not like Mean Girls Catholic style, right? Like nobody cared. Nobody cared about the fate of my immortal soul. But God in his goodness, he nudged me a little bit. And I went into the confessional out of imaginary peer pressure. And I think Jesus was like, baby girl, good enough. Like, I'll take it. Normally, you need a little bit of contrition, but sometimes I think God squints because I walked into that confessional thinking, I'm just going to say a couple of things to some priest, move the heck on with my life. Like, I don't need this. But in confession, you're not talking to a priest. In confession, you're kneeling at the foot of the cross and giving Jesus Christ the hammer that you used to nail him there. And he's reaching out his pierced hand saying, I still love you. I still want you. And that's a really intense realization. And so I just started to sob, right? God bless Father Mark Moretti. I don't know if y'all know Father Mark. He kept having to interrupt me to change the subject so that I could calm down enough to breathe, right? I was like, and he was like, how's your little brother? I distinctly remember, how's your little brother doing? And I was like, he's awkward, right? So then I talked trash about my little brother in the confessional, which is super classy. But I remember walking out of that confessional and standing underneath the starry Virginia sky, dehydrated from all the fluids I had lost out my face, thinking, shoot, if Jesus is God, that changes everything. If Jesus is God, that changes everything. That doesn't just change my Sunday morning, that changes my Saturday night. That changes the way I talk to God, but the way I talk to people, the way I act, the way I dress, it changes everything. Not because suddenly I got this list of rules I need to follow, because Christianity is not primarily a list of rules, right? Like the rules matter, okay? Don't go tell your parents there was a missionary, she says I do what I want. But it's not like check all the right boxes, you're a good person, you get a halo, right? Or like if you can use consubstantial in a sentence, you get years off of purgatory. Christianity is fundamentally the truth that you are deeply, wildly, unceasingly loved beyond imagining by a God who died to save you. Before there was time, God loved you, was pouring out his love for you, created the universe for love of you, sent prophets crying out his love, and finally came his own self, and the God of the universe became a zygote for you. and was ignored and ridiculed and betrayed and rejected. And finally, he was stripped naked, beaten to a pulp, nailed to a cross to suffocate to death for you, not for y'all, but for you. And then he rose, literally went to hell and back because he would rather die than live without you. That's what you're worth. That's what I realized that Saturday night in 1997. That I was loved and that I was called to more than just this world. See, the thing is that this world is never going to satisfy you. And you can try and find things to fill the hunger and the ache and the anguish, but you were made for more than this world. And I realized that 13 years old, and I don't really go halfway. Like if I'm gonna do something, I will destroy it. So I was like, I'm gonna win church. What now? And then I like signed up for all of the possible things and went to all of the possible things and basically moved into St. Mark's for the rest of high school. But it wasn't that I was like, watch me, everybody look how amazing I am. And okay, that was a part of it. Like I'm real proud. But mostly it was that I had discovered what it was to be loved. And there is a joy that comes in knowing who you are in Jesus that the world cannot offer. And I had been so miserable. And now all of a sudden it was different. I wasn't like delighted all the time. I didn't like finish middle school without ever being unhappy. Like that's not how middle school works, right? But underneath the surface of the turmoil and the angst and the uncertainty and the difficulty and the rejection and all of the things that come of being a human being, I knew who I was. I knew that like, yeah, it's awful when your whole friend group decides that they don't love you anymore, right? But I am still loved because I am not what they say I am. I am not the shame of my past. I am not my failure. I am not my uncertainty. I am not my reputation. I am not my sin. You are not your sin. You aren't your shame or your abortion or your addiction or your parents' failed marriage or your abuse or your GPA or your test scores or how many Instagram followers you have. You aren't how many people want to be with you or how many people want to be you. You are loved. That's who you are. And I think that during quarantine, it's so easy to become overwhelmed by just the difficulty of the little things. And maybe some of y'all, things are like real hard, right? Like maybe your parents lost their jobs and you can't make bills. Maybe somebody you love is on a ventilator with COVID-19. Maybe you have been betrayed. Like maybe there's some like real big, awful stuff going on. That does not change who you are. It doesn't change that you're loved. It doesn't change the fact that Jesus has triumphed over sin and death. And this world is sometimes awful, awful. But in that suffering, you're held and you're known. I think for a lot of us, things aren't maybe agonizing right now. You're just sort of miserable, right? Like you are always around your siblings. Those are the people that you least want to spend time with in your life. And you are always around them, right? And your parents are like all up in your stuff. And I mean, drama is bad enough when you actually see people and like hear their tone of voice, but when everything is via text and you have to be in Zoom meetings like 100% of your life, and like there's even more work than there was before, but there's none of like the social outlet of school, like it's just that like chipping away at your soul kind of misery, and you don't even have the sacraments for that to give you the grace that you need. But none of that changes who you are in Jesus. None of that changes the fact that God the Father, before there was time, thought, oh, I'm going to make him. I'm going to make her. This is going to be awesome. And I love that as Catholics, we have this knowledge of who we are in Jesus, but I love that we have these saints who've gone before us, saints who struggled with mental illness, saints who had divorced parents, saints who lived in absolute uncertainty, who didn't know what they were going to do after high school, who didn't know what they were going to do on Tuesday, right? Like we are not alone. And when we look at the lives of these saints and we see the way that God sanctifies suffering, you know, he doesn't always take it away. It's going to be a while before things are back to normal in this quarantine mess, but we have an opportunity right now to say, I am not my circumstances. I am not my frustration. I am not my fear. I am not my loneliness. I am loved. And I always think about Saint Therese, known as the greatest saint of modern times. One of my favorite moments in the story of Saint Therese, there was this one nun that she just hated. She just could not stand this. It's like the most obnoxious person you've ever met, but you have to live with them, right? And y'all are like, I know, quarantine. But she, she's got this other sister, and she's like, everything Therese does is wrong, right? So the sister's like, Therese, why are you sitting there? You shouldn't be sitting. You got to sit over there. And Therese sits up there. She's like, Therese, why are you sitting so far away from? And Therese brings her food, and she's like, you're feeding me so much. You want to make me fat? And Therese's like, I'm sorry, I'll bring you less. And she's like, what are you trying to starve me? I mean, like, everything Therese does is wrong. And this woman's the most obnoxious woman on the planet. And Therese was like, I'ma love her. I'ma love her so hard that it changes eternity. And so she decided that she was going to treat this woman like she was the greatest thing that had ever happened. And so like the woman would be sick, and Therese was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go visit her. And we're like, why are you visiting me, Therese? Go out and do your work. And Therese was like, oh my gosh, I would love to go do my work. Thank you, right? Therese made a decision, right? This woman who wanted to do small things with great love. She said, I am going to love this person who I find unlovable. And Therese herself was transformed, because when you put love somewhere, you find love. But this woman too was utterly changed. And after Therese died, when they were trying to determine if she was a saint, they sent a priest to the convent to ask around and to get a sense of who Therese was. And he finds this woman. He knows who this woman is, right? From reading Therese's diary, he's like, okay, you're obviously the worst person in the world. Like, I get it. And she's like, I don't think you should interview me. He's like, why not? She said, I was her favorite. She loved me the best. She treated me better than anybody did. Obviously, she likes me more than everybody. It wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be fair. And he was like, okay, you know what? We could probably canonize her right now. Strength that she made this woman feel so loved. And I think for us right now in quarantine, especially for you guys who are with your family so much more than you're used to, that's the invitation, to know who you are, that you are loved, to find that joy there, and then to say, okay, I'm gonna love so powerfully that the people around me, the people I'm stuck with, begin to believe that they're loved too. So that's my challenge for you guys. First of all, to sit with Jesus, especially if you don't feel like you know him in that way, to sit with him and say, Lord, I want to know what it means that you love me. I want to know what it means that you love me. I don't just want to like have an idea, like this vague infinite love, whatever. I want to encounter that love. I want to have that moment that changes my life. And then from that to say, Jesus, I want to love other people like they too are worthy of that love. And I'm going to fail, and I'm going to start again tomorrow. And I'm going to fail, and I'm going to start again the next day. Because holiness doesn't mean you never screw up. Holiness means when you mess up, you say, Jesus, I'm yours. And I am not my sin. I am the product of your love. So let's go. Make me new.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Meg. I wanted to ask the teens who are with us, if any of you have a question for Meg, put it in the chat box so we can maybe ask them a little bit more directed questions. And that would be great, have a little more of a dialogue. So I saw one person put a question up earlier. We'll see if we'll quiz you here. Is Saint Therese incorrupt?
No.
Okay.
But you can go visit her in Lisieux, and while you're there, you can see her mom and dad, who are both saints. And then you can go 45 minutes away to Caen, and you can see her big sister, Leonie, who was like a hot mess disaster of a human being, who was also going to be a saint. She's a servant of God, and she's fantastic.
All right. So so go ahead and put your questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure we ask Meg the question. All right. So a lot of people are just saying they really enjoyed your talk. Starting to maybe get, okay, here's our first question. Where does your mail go?
Oh, that's so complicated. So mostly people are just like, hey, I want to send you something. And I'm like, great, when? And they're like, tomorrow. And I'm like, for real tomorrow? And they're like, for real tomorrow. And I'm like, actually tomorrow. And they're like, yes. So then I give them an address of where I will be like in 2 weeks, where I already know the address, but like it wouldn't be weird for mail for me to show up there. And then they don't send it. So then I have to give them a new address, and then they send it too late and it gets there and I have to have it forwarded, but then that gets there too late. And basically people write to me and they're like, can I send you mail? And I'm like, can you just like send me a picture of the mail you want to send to me, please? Like, if it's not a check, it's just not worth it.
Oh my gosh, that's great. All right, here's another one. How did you discern this calling that you're living right now?
So I was a teacher for 5 years, and I knew that God was calling me out of the classroom. I had always had a lot of peace and a lot of joy in being a teacher, and then like all of a sudden, all of the peace was removed. And in my experience, if everything external is the same, but the internal has changed, you got to listen to that. And I like, I sort of checked in on how I was doing naturally. Like I felt kind of trapped. I was living in a boarding school. I didn't have a car, so I bought a car just to like make sure that wasn't the problem. That's a very expensive way to discern, but here we are. And like everything was still wrong. So I prayed about leaving. I felt a lot of peace. I prayed about staying at that school. I felt a lot of anxiety, a lot of unrest. This is the kind of prayer that only works if you're in a state of grace. If you're in a state of mortal sin, you just can't tell what God is saying to you. Like you're too twisted up inside. And it's hard to discern when the only way you ever pray is discernment, right? If your prayer life is rooted in trying to love Jesus, then when you ask him what he wants from you, you can be pretty sure that you're not like just focused on yourself, that it really is about following him. So I felt a lot of peace about leaving, and I like pulled out my Excel spreadsheet with all the different schools I want to teach at and their average SAT and their curriculum and their dress code and how many saints went there, because I'm insane. And I think in Excel spreadsheets. Did we mention that I went to TJ? I'm like not a bohemian, go where you go, it's all good, whatever. Like I like plans and I like rules and I like everything in place, and I live in a car. So I was like, I guess I should pray about my not teaching. Like that's not a thing, right? That's all I've ever wanted to do, is all I've ever trained for. And I prayed about not teaching, and I felt this resounding peace. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do with that, right? Like I have a master's degree from Notre Dame, right? That and a winning personality will get you a second interview at McDonald's, right? This is a master's degree in theology, okay? Like it's not a lucrative degree. And I was talking to a priest friend of mine, and he was like, well, you're good at public speaking. You've been wanting to do more of that. And I was like, okay, you can't just quit life and be a public speaker. Like that's not a thing. And I took it to prayer, and Jesus was just like, tell me why not. Like I couldn't come up with a reason not to be homeless and unemployed. And if you're naturally like super chill, like bum on the couch, kind of do whatever, and you think being homeless and unemployed is a good idea, it's not. Get a job. But I'm like so type A, right? And so when I'm sitting here like, wow, this is a thing, like it just makes sense. If you find that it really makes sense when it's something that is contrary to all your natural inclinations, you got to listen to that. And I just felt a lot of peace in the idea of doing something that I would never myself choose. So I went with it. I thought it was going to be for 2 months. It's been 8 years. So apparently I'm really spot on what of discernment, a little bit off on the how long, but that's fair. Because if God had been like, I want you to be homeless indefinitely, I would have been like, I have a brain tumor. Like, this can't be right. But so far so good. 8 years. I've never once had to sleep in my car.
Nice. When you dropped the line that you went to TJ, there was a little bit of you mean Thomas Jefferson High School in science technology? So yes, you were a nerd in high school.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to say that I was delightful,
He was smart.
but whatever, bro, whatever.
Very intelligently gifted, and then went off to Notre Dame. And so that's pretty awesome though, because I mean, you are intelligently gifted and you still chose to do what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That shows dedication to God's call.
I can make bank and like have a house and stuff.
Someone
like
said that somebody asked, does she just take a dart and just throw it at like a map and just decide where to go next?
I mean, essentially.
Where are you going to go next? Like, what's your next spot?
Probably coming back to Front Royal because my sister's kids are supposed to have first communion.
Okay.
And then things are a little bit complicated because normally I'm like someplace for 3 days and then I drive 12 hours and I'm there overnight and then I drive 10 hours and you can't.
With all of this
that's
going
not
on,
a great time to do that.
Yeah, your regular routine of speaking at parishes can't happen.
Right.
In current climate, very easy.
But you know what? I've spent 8 years not having any idea what's going on. So that really, it helps. You're kind of like, okay, well now nobody has any idea what's going on. But basically I just spend serious time in silent prayer every day and then I live my life. And I trust that if I'm giving God space to speak, He's either going to form my heart to desire what he desires. He's going to step in and stop me before I do something stupid, or he's going to fix it after I mess up. Like I really think I'm going to go to my judgment, and God's going to be like, baby girl, you thought I wanted you to be a hobo? Like, that's not a thing. People don't do that. And I'm going to be like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's going to, oh no, great job. Like, it was weird, but man, you tried so hard. Like, I just think that God really honors our earnest efforts to please him. And he's not going to fault you for being an idiot. You know, like if you're really seeking his will and you're trying to be in his will, like you're good.
So, that's awesome. One of our more practical minded people wanted to know, how do you like survive? How do you pay for your gas, your food? Where does that come? Because you don't have like a job, traditional.
Yeah, so I don't charge anything when I speak, but God will never be outdone in generosity. I would say probably like 80% of the time people give me money. I don't have any fees. If you don't pay me, that's not a big deal. Sometimes people are like really generous. I write a lot too. I get some money for writing these days, but honestly, God has all the money. And it's just never been an issue. And I have savings too. I'm not like this incredibly holy person who's just like, I'm just gonna walk on water. Like I have a savings account. I have friends. Like if I ran out of money, I could get a job. But the Lord has just made it really clear that this is how he wants to provide for me, and that he wants me to be totally open. Like when I go to other countries, I can't charge money because I don't have a work visa. And that's not a problem because I don't ever charge money. So then I just like have 3 months where I don't make any money at all, but then like I get back, God gives me some more money. It all works out.
Well, that's great, because that's very countercultural. It's not what we're taught when we were going through school. You know, you pick your lifestyle based on sometimes the finance is a big part of that decision making. But to be able to just fully trust and rely on God, and to do what you're doing, and to see that it's been working for 8 years, definitely seems like a pretty good stamp of approval from God to say that you're supposed to be doing. So that's pretty awesome. Somebody asked if you had a website. You want to go ahead and give them your website?
Yeah, so the easiest thing to do is Google Hobo for Christ. And you'll find my website. You'll also find my podcast. And then on my website, there are like a bunch of buttons so you can follow me on social media. I don't blog a lot these days, but I am really active on Instagram and Facebook if you're secretly old. I'm on Twitter too, although Twitter's garbage fire. But yeah, you can like check out all those things. I've got a YouTube channel, but mostly Instagram and my podcast are where things are going to be frequently posted.
Awesome. And I see that Joey Clem posted the website in our chat box, so you guys can copy and paste that and go visit her. What are some of the most recent podcast topics that you've spoken about?
Ooh, I don't know. I have not really done much during the quarantine, but I'm about to finish up writing a book, and then I think I'm going to do an episode on every mystery of the Rosary. So those should hopefully be coming out fairly soon. Other than that, I do a lot of telling saint stories to kids, but just because it says for kids does not mean you don't want to listen to it, because I guarantee you haven't heard about almost any of those things. So it's just like a little bit extra enthusiastic. So you can listen to it.
Well, one of our teens said that she heard your podcast with Stacy Sumero on the Called and Caffeinated. So excellent. I see that. I know that Stacy also mentioned to me that you're one of her favorite people. So she was excited when I told her you were coming.
She's great.
So that's awesome. Well, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you guys.